Ugh, you're just too kind, shielding that washed-up old hag like that. I wonder if he's trying to make me jealous. Are you kidding? There's no need for jealousy. I just don't want to provoke her and get blamed for something. Besides, Noah is pretty talented, so it's wise to curry a little favor with him now for when we need help in our old age, right? Oh, right. You're really smart after all. I was about to burst into the room, enraged by the words of my husband and his mistress from the basement, mocking not just me but even our son. However, my son Noah, seeing me like this, silently approached the basement door and loudly said, "I've locked up." He then looked at me and smiled warmly. My name is Amelia Smith, a 45-year-old homemaker. My family consists of my husband Kyle, who's 7 years older than me and works at a trading company, and our son Noah, a sophomore in college. I met Kyle 23 years ago when I was appointed as his dedicated assistant in the sales department of the company I joined as a new graduate. As we spent time together, both in the hard and exciting aspects of work, we grew close in our personal lives and eventually started dating. 6 months later, Kyle's father fell ill, and Kyle proposed a quick marriage, saying, "It's cliché, but I want to ease my father's mind by getting married." Soon after, we were blessed with Noah, and my father-in-law, energized by his first grandchild, managed to regain some health. I had actually retired upon marrying, but once Noah was old enough for preschool, I wanted to work again, even if it was just a part-time or casual job. That's when a college friend approached me to help with their startup. I was completely motivated by this unexpected opportunity, but just then, Kyle received an overseas assignment, and we all had to relocate, causing my plans for re-employment to fall through. Even after returning home, opportunities to return to work came up, but each time, my mother-in-law and Kyle, both doting on Noah, would say, "We're comfortable enough without you working. Why make Noah a latchkey kid? And you know, Amelia, kids grow up so fast. You can't redo these years." Eventually, I was persuaded to remain a full-time housewife, dedicated to supporting Kyle and Noah. However, when Noah was in 4th grade, an incident changed my life. Despite repeated warnings from our doctor about high-calorie and high-salt intake, my mother-in-law collapsed, ignoring all advice. She survived but was left bedridden with partial paralysis. Kyle was the only son, so I had braced for the eventual care of his parents, but the reality was far more challenging than imagined. His mother, who had once enjoyed a flashy lifestyle, traveling with friends and dining out, while neglecting her physically frail husband, now found herself incapacitated and cut off from that world. To add to her frustration, the friends she thought she had only sent token get-well messages and flowers, quickly excluding her from their social media circles, leaving her isolated and extremely angry. She became increasingly hostile, lashing out at anyone around her, including the nurses, rehab staff, and doctors at the hospital. Eventually, they could no longer manage her care, and after a series of repeated incidents at a subsequent facility, we were left with no option but to take her into our home for care. At that time, our family was living in a condo about a 20-minute train ride from my in-laws' house. Despite my father-in-law regaining some health, leaving the care of my physically robust mother-in-law solely to him was not feasible. This situation necessitated almost daily visits to their home. Furthermore, the challenge of managing the caregiving, accompanying her to medical appointments, and handling household chores for 2 homes was an enormous task. Seeing me overwhelmed, Noah would say, "Mom, I vacuumed and did the laundry today since I didn't have tutoring." He'd also cook meals, like saying, "I made nachos today." It's not exactly a recipe since I followed what we learned at school. During spring and summer breaks, he'd even find time between his tutoring sessions to help with chores like carrying groceries and weeding the garden at my in-laws' place. Despite his own desires to play and be pampered, he was always considerate of me. On the other hand, Kyle, despite claiming to be busy with work, never offered to help even on weekends. Instead, he spent his time on golf outings, study groups, and socializing with friends. He often made snide remarks about my cooking, like, "Really? This is what you serve a tired husband, supermarket-ready meals? Great job for a full-time housewife." He would also find fault with minor things like mildew in the bathroom or dust in the corners, scolding me, "Just because you're helping your mom doesn't mean you can slack off. I'm not working all day just so you can laze around." The stress from caregiving, combined with Kyle's constant criticism, steadily eroded my patience. Then, one day, something decisive happened. There was a seminar at Noah's tutoring center about his upcoming middle school entrance exams. I had seldom been able to attend such events, but this was an important opportunity to learn more about the process, especially since the exams were the following year. However, the seminar was scheduled for an entire Saturday afternoon, which meant I had to prepare meals in advance for my in-laws and leave my father-in-law to take care of my mother-in-law, a prospect that worried me. Given that it was the weekend, I asked Kyle if he could take care of his parents for the day. His response was dismissive and unsympathetic. What? Why should I have to do that? Just cancel your seminar attendance, and that's the end of it. Normally, I would have backed down after such a response, but this time, it was about Noah's future, and I couldn't just let it go. But it's about taking care of your own parents, I persisted. It's not like I'm asking because I want to go to the salon or attend a friend's wedding, right? I'm not even asking you to look after them the whole day, just a few hours in the afternoon. It's strange that you see this as such a burden. However, Kyle wouldn't listen. He said, no matter what you say, I can't do it. It's not my responsibility, it's yours, and then he just left. Feeling lost, I considered my options. My parents live far enough away that a high-speed train ride is required, and they are currently being looked after by my brother and his wife, so asking them for help wasn't feasible. Ideally, I could hire a paid caregiver, but due to my mother-in-law's hysterical tantrums and unreasonableness, which were well known, no one was willing to take on the job. So, I went to my in-laws' house, storing the food I had prepared the night before in their fridge, feeling overwhelmed. Seeing me distressed, Noah said, "It's okay, Mom. If I don't understand something about the exams, I can ask my friends or the teacher directly." But it seemed too unfair to impose any more on him, as he had already endured so much. Then, after hearing the situation from Noah, my father-in-law said, "I'm sorry, Amelia. We, as well as Kyle, have been taking you and Noah for granted. You've even prepared meals for us, so it's okay. I want you to attend the seminar for Noah's sake." Initially, I refused, but he insisted, and seeing the eager look in Noah's eyes, I decided to go to the seminar after all. At the seminar, I gained valuable insights and advice about Noah's desired school and his entrance exams. I also had the opportunity to speak with Noah's teacher from the tutoring center, whom I had only communicated with via email before. The teacher provided a lecture on Noah's progress and the support we should provide at home for his upcoming exams. I was truly glad I attended. On our way back from the tutoring center, Noah and I stopped by my mother-in-law's favorite patisserie to buy her most beloved mousse as a gift. Grandma will be so happy. She hasn't had this mousse in a while since the doctor told her to stop, Noah said with a smile, holding the cake box. I responded, "Yes, that's right. I've been preparing low-calorie meals for her for the past 3 days just for this. I even called the doctor to make sure it was okay." With an unusually happy feeling, we headed towards my in-laws' house. However, what greeted us was a shocking sight: an ambulance with flashing red lights parked in front of their house, with paramedics rushing in and out. Frozen in disbelief, Noah urged me, Mom, stay strong," and ran towards the house. Snapped back to reality, I followed him and found my mother-in-law being carried out on a stretcher. With my father-in-law walking beside her, a large band-aid stained red on his forehead, supported by a paramedic. "Ah, Noah, Amelia. It's okay, it's nothing serious." They weakly smiled as they were taken away in the ambulance. After securing the house, I hurried to the hospital they were taken to. According to my father-in-law, who had finished his treatment first, my mother-in-law had thrown a tantrum when the reheated dinner I prepared was too hot, saying, "It's too hot. I could burn myself eating this." In her anger, she tried to throw the plate, lost balance, and fell from her wheelchair. My father-in-law, rushing to help her, stumbled and hit his forehead on the corner of the table. Although my father-in-law reassured me, saying, "None of this is Amelia or Noah's fault, it's all because of my wife's hysteria, so please don't worry," my husband, who arrived later, was furious and blamed us, shouting, "This is all your fault for being so selfish." He ordered Noah and me to take full-time care of his parents and abruptly canceled the lease on the condo where we lived as a family. With no choice, Noah and I moved into my in-laws' house. Thankfully, they had an old annex that my father-in-law used for work, so we had enough space, but life became even more centered around caring for my mother-in-law. To make matters worse, after my mother-in-law injured her back in a fall from her wheelchair, requiring a half-month of complete rest, she began showing symptoms of dementia. She would scream day and night, not only at me but also at my father-in-law and Noah, accusing us of being thieves. "You're all robbers. You've come to steal my jewels, haven't you? She attempted to spit on us and even resorted to scratching and biting. My hands were constantly covered in scratches, and my hair started falling out due to stress. Despite this, when Kyle visited once a month to give living expenses, he would mock my appearance. Wow, look at you. Hair all messy, skin in bad shape, you look like a monster. Indeed, back then, I was constantly busy with caregiving for my mother-in-law, which left my skin roughened from disinfectants and detergents. I had no time to take care of myself, often wearing my hair and clothes in a disheveled, unwashed state. Although my father-in-law and Noah protested Kyle's comments, I felt too guilty about not being there on the day of the accident to stand up to him. 10 years passed. Despite the difficult circumstances, Noah grew up to be a strong person and was admitted to his dream private middle school. Kyle continued to neglect our family, only contacting us through social media. Rumors said he was living with another woman, but he never skimped on Noah's education fees, so I treated him as if he were not part of our lives. Last year, when Noah got into college, my mother-in-law passed away. It may sound cold, but during the funeral, as I listened to the prayers, I remember thinking, this is finally a closure. However, at the funeral, Kyle showed up with a flashy dressed woman, ignoring the whispers of "who is that woman" from those around. Then, he reappeared and announced to my father-in-law, who looked bitterly upset, "Now that mom has passed away, I'm thinking of divorcing Amelia. I plan to support Noah until he graduates from college, covering his tuition and living expenses. And I intend to give Amelia some property settlement." He even voluntarily mentioned that the woman he brought earlier was his partner for remarriage, Ava, with whom he had been living, and their relationship had been going on for about 10 years. Hearing this, my father-in-law exclaimed, 10 years. So while pushing the responsibility of caring for your mother and me onto Amelia, you've been enjoying life with your mistress? Kyle remained unfazed. Even smirking, "Why are you angry, Dad? Everyone was happy because Amelia served as a caregiver. I'm not a monster. I'll even add a bonus for her caregiving contributions to the property settlement. Besides, Amelia got to experience being the wife of an elite like me." Looking at his smug face, I felt oddly calm. The man in front of me didn't seem like the one I had vowed to share my life with in front of a minister. He seemed like a complete stranger, and an unpleasant one at that. He left, stating he intended to initiate divorce proceedings soon, and departed in high spirits. Watching his departing back, my father-in-law slumped his shoulders and apologized to us. "I'm truly sorry, Amelia, Noah. I knew he wasn't doing well, but I didn't expect him to be such a fool." I felt only gratitude towards my father-in-law. There was no room in my heart for anger towards him. The only reason I managed to keep going during the hardest times was that he was always there, extending a helping hand and standing by me. After seeing off my mother-in-law, I wanted to ensure a peaceful retirement for my father-in-law, but with Kyle wanting a divorce, that might not be possible. My only regret was not being able to do more for him. I was already resigned to the divorce, lacking the energy or will to fight back. And then, at the celebration of life for my mother-in-law, Kyle showed up again, this time with Ava. He told my father-in-law, "After the divorce, Ava and I will move in here with you. Ava is young and beautiful, unlike Amelia. You'll be happy, right?" He then showed Ava around the house and grounds, completely ignoring his mother's death. Relatives who overheard their conversation said they were discussing rebuilding the old house into a condominium. "This house is getting old. It might be a good idea to rebuild it into a condo. We could rent out the lower floors as commercial space and live in a penthouse on the top floor," they were supposedly saying. The property, though old, was in a prime location, a 6-minute walk from the nearest station, on a sizable corner lot. I wasn't surprised to hear their plans, knowing that real estate developers had previously approached my father-in-law about selling the property. However, when the celebration of life was about to start, Kyle and Ava were nowhere to be found. Even though Kyle was the deceased son, we couldn't just ignore his absence. As relatives and I started looking for them, Noah silently pointed towards the basement of the annex and gestured for us to be quiet. We tiptoed closer, only to find Kyle and his mistress in the midst of an intimate moment. This alone made my father-in-law tremble with anger, looking like he was about to shout at any moment. But the two continued talking about money, saying, "Oh, you're so generous, even giving a property settlement to that washed-up old hag, and no need to be jealous. There's no need to provoke her and face her vengeance. Besides, Noah is quite talented, so it's smart to curry some favor for our future care." Hearing them even think of using my son, Noah, filled me with such rage that I saw red. As I was about to burst into the room in anger, Noah restrained me with a look. He then loudly said, "Oh, how careless to leave this open," and slammed the basement door shut with a loud noise, locking it. Then he loudly announced, "I've locked up," so that his voice echoed inside the now silent room. My father-in-law quickly reacted to Noah. "Oh, I must have forgotten to close it after looking for something. I really don't want to get any older." He then led the gathered relatives back to the main house. Watching everyone enter the heated room, my father-in-law said, "Well, sorry for the commotion. There's nothing much stored in that basement, but I need to keep it locked to make sure some fool doesn't sneak in and cause trouble." He then burst out in a seemingly delighted laugh. About half of the people seemed to understand my father-in-law's intention and looked shocked, but for the rest who hadn't quite grasped it yet, Noah explained, "You uncles might have heard, but that basement, accessible from the garage, has had issues with local troublemakers breaking in before. So, it's dangerous, and we usually keep it locked. Seems like I forgot to lock it today. The lock can't be opened from the inside, so on a cold day like this, it serves as a fitting punishment." After Noah's addition, everyone appeared to be convinced. The basement, in fact, belongs to the annex where Noah and I live. It can only be accessed through the garage, with no entry from inside the house. Originally, it was built by my father-in-law, who was an aerial photographer, to serve as a darkroom for film development and a storage area to protect photo negatives from UV light, so it's quite spacious, about the size of a 29 square meters room. However, with my father-in-law's health declining and his photography work ceasing, it had been unused for about 20 years, with even the electricity cut off. Additionally, when we had just moved into my in-laws' house, Noah, playing an adventure game, got trapped in the basement. The old, decayed doorknob on the inside came off, and he was locked inside, causing quite a commotion. After another incident where local delinquents broke in and nearly caused a fire, the doorknob was replaced with one that could only be locked from the outside. Kyle, who rarely visited our house, would have had no idea about this and must have thought to enjoy a thrilling interlude during the celebration of life by sneaking his mistress into the basement. Such a foolish man. With everyone convinced, we resumed the celebration of life. After it was concluded, the meal for the end of the celebration of life was served, and we all began to eat. However, unnoticed during the ceremony, faint sounds of screaming and banging, as if someone was desperately hitting a door, could be heard from the direction of the annex. It was likely Kyle and Ava calling for help. Yet, my father-in-law and the relatives, even the pastor who had overheard the story, nonchalantly commented, "Ah, it's gotten so cold, it's even snowing. How grateful we are to be able to enjoy this meal and the snow-covered garden in remembrance of the deceased." Checking my phone, I saw that the temperature was expected to drop below freezing. Despite the full blast of the air conditioning, hot carpets, and heaters in the room filled with about 15 people, a chill could still be felt near the windows facing the garden. The concrete-walled basement, with only an old, worn carpet on the floor and no windows, must be freezing in the pitch dark. Yet, I felt no pity, perhaps my heart is cold as the snow outside. However, I felt no pity for them, which might indicate my heart is as cold as the snow. As the gathering ended, the pastor and relatives addressed Noah and me, saying things like, "Stay strong. Any parent can be a good teacher for their children, even as a bad example, and if you ever need anything, don't hesitate to reach out." With that, everyone left for home. Shortly after, the catering service arrived to collect the dishes. Hearing their van's engine, Kyle and his mistress must have realized it was their chance. From inside the basement, they started shouting, "Help us. We're trapped. Get us out of here, and call the police. We're going to freeze to death." The caterer, pale-faced, rushed in and informed us about them. It had been about 2.5 hours since Noah locked them in. It seemed about time to intervene. Pretending to be surprised, we told the caterer, "What? Voices from the basement? That's ridiculous, it's unoccupied, and right. When I closed the door earlier, I thought I heard something. Maybe a burglar got in?" Despite our exaggerated acting, the panicked man didn't catch on and exclaimed, "That's terrible. If we carelessly open it and get attacked, it could be serious. We should call the police," and he promptly dialed 911. Soon, 2 police cars arrived with sirens blaring. The officers, after hearing our story, opened the door and dragged Kyle and his mistress out. They appeared in front of the gathered neighbors and onlookers in a state of undress. I later heard that in the pitch-dark basement, they had lost track of where they had thrown their clothes, resulting in their disheveled appearance. Even as they were being escorted out, they were hurling insults at us. Suddenly brought from darkness into light, and as their eyes adjusted, they were met with the sight of many people smirking at their undignified state. Initially speechless and confused, they let out a scream when they realized they were being filmed on smartphones. They hastily wrapped themselves in blankets provided by the police officers before being taken away. After a while, the police contacted us, and when my father-in-law, Noah, and I arrived, the two were still wrapped in blankets. In a gesture of minimal decency, my father-in-law had collected their clothes from the basement and brought them along. Seeing their own garments, they quickly changed into them. At the police station, we were informed that the two claimed they were intentionally locked in by us. However, after explaining the previous incident of a fire hazard and stating, "It's no wonder my grandson locked the door," finding it open during his grandmother's The Celebration of Life. Who would have thought someone would sneak into the basement with their lover during such an occasion? The officers chuckled and sympathized with us. Despite their protests, the incident of them being locked in the basement was dismissed as merely causing a disturbance and not treated as a serious event. Although we received a mild reprimand, Kyle and his mistress got a stern lecture. By the time we were released, it was past 7 p.m., dark outside, with over 4 inches of snow. Reluctantly, we decided to take them back to the in-laws' house, as leaving them at the police station might cause more trouble. Initially noisy, they dozed off in the car but immediately tried to enter the house upon arrival. My father-in-law and I blocked their way. Ignoring Kyle's demand to, "Hey, what are you doing? Let us in already." Noah came out from the back with their coats and bags and threw them at the couple. "Take these and get out of here. This place has nothing to do with you anymore." Noah glared at them. Kyle, initially taken aback but quickly recovering, shouted, "How dare you speak to your parents like that?" But, seeing his now taller son, he was silenced by Noah's retort, "Parents, huh? Parents who do such embarrassing things are better off not existing." My father-in-law then added, "It seems you still don't understand, but as of today, I am cutting ties with you. Amelia will divorce you, and rest assured, we'll take every penny we can from you and that woman, including alimony and compensation." Kyle and Ava's faces went pale upon hearing this, but my father-in-law continued, "Don't worry about money. If your assets aren't enough, we'll seize whatever your mother left you to cover it." Then, as if they were no longer needed, he literally kicked them out of the house. Later, I divorced Kyle with the help of a lawyer introduced by my father-in-law. The settlement included not only property division but also over $400,000 in compensation for the decade-long caregiving and infidelity. At the lawyer's office, Kyle exploded, "I can't pay such an amount." But there was no reason for us to back down, so the case quickly went to court. There, Kyle stubbornly claimed, "My wife neglected me. I only sought comfort in another woman." But we methodically presented evidence of his 10 years of infidelity and caregiving, along with testimonies from relatives, acquaintances, and neighbors. Although the court initially proposed a settlement, the negotiations continued due to Kyle's refusal to compromise on the amount and terms. During the questioning, Ava, who was also facing a lawsuit from me for damages, became irate right from the start. She exclaimed, "I can't believe this. I've been his mistress for 10 years, believing everything this old man said. I've lost 10 years of my life too, you know? And now, why do I even have to pay money?" She even unwittingly admitted to going on lavish vacations on company expenses and forcing business partners to kick back funds to her. The judge and Kyle's lawyer were stunned by her confession. The trial ended in my complete victory, and though I didn't get the full amount, I managed to take most of Kyle's assets. Ava's outburst also reached his colleagues, leading to his company becoming aware of his misconduct. Consequently, Kyle faced embezzlement charges. The company offered to avoid a criminal case if he repaid the money, but he had none. Desperate, he turned to my father-in-law, who flatly rejected him, saying, "I want nothing to do with someone like you." In the end, he was criminally charged. Upon learning that Kyle was criminally charged, my only concern was whether Noah would be affected. However, the lawyer who helped us during the divorce assured me, "The embezzled money was spent by your ex-husband and his mistress, so you don't need to worry." Relieved, I felt a weight lift off my chest. Kyle later declared bankruptcy, but I was told that embezzled funds are still subject to compensation even after bankruptcy. Despite his efforts to find work, his notoriety, fueled by the basement incident spreading on social media and internet news, made it impossible for him to secure regular employment. He was left with no choice but to take on dubious part-time jobs and risky day labor, and now I hear nothing of him. Ava, facing a hefty compensation claim from me, drained her savings and sold everything given by Kyle, but it still wasn't enough to cover her debts. She lost her contract with the dispatch company and resorted to high-interest loans, eventually leading to rumors of her working in the nightlife with heavy makeup. As for me, I used the money from the property division and compensation to buy a modest apartment, where Noah and I began our new life. My father-in-law, sticking to his word, sold the family house and gifted more than half of the proceeds to Noah. Despite the tax accountant's concerns over the high gift tax, my father-in-law insisted, saying he'd gladly pay if it meant his foolish son wouldn't inherit a penny. Noah plans to use this money for graduate studies abroad after his graduation. My father-in-law also wanted to give me some money, but I respectfully declined. To my father-in-law, who expressed dissatisfaction saying, "But that still doesn't sit well with me," I proposed that when I visit him twice a month at the retirement home where he now lives, we could go out for lunch together at a nearby steak restaurant or bistro and he could treat me then. Noah tries to visit as often as possible too, which seems to make my father-in-law happy. Once things settle down a bit more, I plan to study for a qualification and re-enter the workforce. Although thinking about the 10 years spent caregiving for my mother-in-law sometimes brings a pang of pain, there's no need to dwell on the past and spoil the future. I'm determined to live my life moving forward.